the go live button. So in about 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, Gippy Skippies, it says we are live. Excellent. Well, hello everyone. My name is Kat Udero, psychic empath and psychic wrangler. Before we see who I've wrangled into today's show, let me welcome you to Third Eye Salon, where in each and every show we take a fresh and deep look between the veils of reality, and today is no different. We are welcoming back experiencer, researcher, author, amazing human being, and, well, dual soul, Suzy Hansen, onto our show. We have her for 1.5 hours today. So welcome, Suzy. We're so happy that you're here with us.
Thank you, Kat, Angela, and Linda. Very happy to be here, and sincere apologies for my illness last time that prevented me being on your show.
It is okay. It's all perfect timing, other than I'm glad it was a quick recovery and you didn't suffer long because you've had enough of that. But we'll talk more about that a little bit later. So let's also say hello to my bestie, psychic and conscious business coach, Linda Coulter-Burge. How are you, Linda?
I am wonderful. I'm so happy to be here. And I'm excited to see who's in our chat. So please sign in. Let me know you're there. As always, I am your chat host. And as always, my policy is play nice or get out. So I don't mess around. This is a safe place for everyone to explore, ask questions, think, ponder, and have great conversations about it. You don't have to agree with everything. You just have to be nice about it, okay? Make sure that you like, share, and subscribe right now so that more people see this, okay? Hit that like button because those stupid algorithms tell us you have to, okay? If you can't get it right now, if you can't watch it right now or in the future, don't forget you can get us on Apple and Spotify. And also join our Facebook group because we continue the conversations there and have a lot of other wonderful things where people can talk about what they're doing. So join our Facebook group, Third Eye Salon, if you haven't. And for those of you who have loved our shows and been able to donate by buying us coffees, thank you. It really does help. And if you can't, that's fine. We love you always, whatever you can do, okay? So with that, Suzy, I'm so excited. I was chomping at the bit before to ask you a question, so we'll see if I can fit it in this time.
And we're also going to say hello to Miss Angela Anderson. She is an artist. She is a builder of custom motorcycles, former software engineer, shaman, really anything she wants, she can do it. How are you? And you got some good news, don't you? Don't you have some? If you want to drop some good news, you can.
I'm not ready to drop that good news yet.
Okay.
I'm there, and then I'll drop that good news. So,
all right. Sorry.
A lot of things in process, a lot of things in the works. But I'm excited to be here today. Excited to be on with Suzy Hansen, who's such a wealth or treasure trove of information as a dual soul. She has so many different and fascinating stories and experiences to share. So I'm excited to hear those and for our audience to hear those as well today. So yeah, excited to get to it today. Nice.
Thank you so much. All right. So I'm going to read some of Suzy's bio. The full bio is down below. But this kind of gives you a little snippet into Suzy's world. So Suzy is a UFO sighting investigator and researcher, author and experiencer from New Zealand. By profession, she was a school teacher and studied grief counseling. Suzy Hansen's worldview was shaken in 1975 at age of 20 when her car was engulfed and lifted off the road by a massive white ball of light, resulting in 90 minutes of missing time. This incident catapulted Suzy headlong into researching New Zealand's nationwide UFO sightings and close encounters contact experiences. Suzy has actively investigated New Zealand's UFO sightings for 46 years. She is the founding director of UFOCUS New Zealand Research Network, or UFOCUS New Zealand, a nationwide group that investigates and documents New Zealand UFO sightings with a particular interest in New Zealand aviation and military UFO sightings and UFO sightings that occur around times of seismic and volcanic activity in New Zealand. And yes, we will talk about that. today. UFOCUS New Zealand's archives hold over 10,000 UFO sighting reports, making it one of the largest archives worldwide. That is tremendous. So there's a little snippet about Susie. There's more down below. But yeah, Susie, we're so happy that you're feeling better and that you're back with us, and that you're doing great. Thank you so much for being here with us.
Thank you, Kat. It's great to be here.
Well, I wanted to kind of dive in on one of the things you've been talking about recently is in your book that you wrote, Dual Soul, and that information's down below for you to check that out and purchase that on Amazon if you like. You had talked about being in an undersea base in 1980s. And so it's not just that you're a contactee, but like you're a lifelong experiencer, like you have a relationship with your ET family or ET kin. And so I was wondering, there was so much content that came through that about the future and these warnings and these sort of directives. And I'm wondering how that has played out and how you see that playing out now. And I'm wondering, yeah, however you can share that with us. I know it's a big chunk of information to ask, but whatever kind of strikes you as important from that.
Well, I'll get into that, but I'd like to start first by talking about the corroboration of this. So a lot of other experiencers have talked about being taken to underground or undersea bases. And so in my mind, it's absolutely a reality because I've experienced it and I know others who have. But I think that important little factor is some kind of evidence of it. And you can't take a photograph and take it away with you, of course. So you have to rely on coming across other people who can tell you a little piece of information that they could only know and recognize if they'd actually been there. And when I first met Robert Salas, who's involved with the Maelstrom Air Force Base incident in the late 60s, he read my material and heard me talking about it at a conference in Norway and said to me that he had recollection of exactly the same kind of office area, office in inverted commas, because remember, in these bases, there's generally not just ETs, you have humans working there as well. And so there was this human-like office area, but its position, its the way that it was formatted and the way that you got to this office area, he was able to describe identically to me. And you'd only know that if you'd been to a base. So he now has a speech that he gives at conferences and meetings about undersea bases, and he's used my material as a comparison or a similar experience as his own. So it's really good when you get that corroborative evidence that says, you know, this is what the other person saw as well. In this particular incident, we were shown a number of things. In the past, we'd been shown really terrible, tragic, earth-changing scenarios on screen that was so tragic and so shocking that we were all in tears and basically shaking. So this time we were shown something similar, but we were psychologically prepared for it now, and we were able to absorb the information that both a human and an ET were giving to us, and be able to think about it logically and clearly without that shock factor in the background, that terrible feeling of tragedy and helplessness. So on this occasion, the human started speaking first, and he talked about how the setup is that they have got prearranged, that there are people right throughout governments and institutions throughout the world who basically are trained by them and the ETs, so that when the news breaks and when things happen, these people can somehow or other do a damage control, if you want to put it that way, but not in a negative sense, in a positive sense of helping this whatever might be revealed to be revealed in the right way and in the least damaging way to the public. We often hear people saying, oh, look, we're ready for disclosure and we're ready to hear all about this. But as I've said before, a small percentage of the population may be ready, but the vast percentage of the population don't even think about UFOs in their day-to-day life. And those are sometimes people who they may be very wealthy and lead a kind of a golden life, but there's just as many who live in very poor conditions, and something like that would have a huge impact on them. So I think that the way that they explained things at this meeting was very good, because they also went into the way humans approach new information and shocking information. How do we psychologically process it? What are our knee-jerk reactions? What does humanity, no matter what country we may come from, our emotions and the way we approach something that's threatening, potentially threatening or unusual or paranormal, we have certain ways that we respond. And you know, the process has been deciding on which is the best way to bring forward disclosure and bring forward news of that ET is here and has been here a long time and has been working with humans, so that the man in the street is a person who benefits from this, and not necessarily the big corporations and the military groups that may want to weaponize some of the technology that may become available eventually. So we will also shown in the future what we, as members of this quite small group, less than 20 watching this display, what we might do in the future. And we were shown futuristic images of ourselves writing and speaking and being quite prominent. At that time, back in the 80s, I would not have thought that I would be doing something like that, and I just couldn't believe it. And it actually was quite a shocking thought that I might be doing this sort of work, and of course now I am. So we also see some of the things they talked about coming true or coming to fruition. And they talked about the increasing earth changes and how the severe weather would change. And this was long before we started talking about, you know, severe weather changes and global warming and all that kind of thing. So they had it sussed way back, and they've been preparing huge groups of people to combat this. Not to combat it perhaps, but to help other people to face these things and to be able to manage their own situations better. So there's been a certain amount of preparatory work done, and that's what's really essential at this point in time, is that as individuals we take responsibility for our lives and our future, and we start preparing in the best way possible for tougher times to come. Because what they were saying in this meeting is that disclosure is going to be a long, drawn-out process. It has to be for a whole variety of reasons. And part of that reason is what we will go through as a planet in terms of earth changes and planetary and, you know, climatic changes, etc. And so it has to all be fitted around this. You can't shock the whole of humanity with all of these things happening, and a pandemic happening, and earth changes happening, and severe weather and flooding and volcanic eruptions. Oh, and disclosure at the same time that ETs are here. We have to space this out somehow or other and bring it in a way that the populace can deal with it and manage. So recently we've seen a lot of people coming forward, Pentagon, from the States, from the Pentagon, from the CIA, and they're talking about disclosure and a lot of information that's coming out and that they're studying. And the UFO community at large, I think in general, a lot of the UFO community got quite excited about that, thinking that any day full disclosure was going to take place. But really, I think we're starting to see a slowdown in that now. We're starting to see they've gathered some information, they've gauged the populace, they've gauged what the UFO field is willing to do or whatever. And their response now appears to be that doors are quietly closing. So the doors we thought were opening and going to have material coming out of them, they're quietly closing down. There are reports to be written, and there are committees to meet and things to be analysed, etc. And we're seeing a process whereby information has been given to them and made accessible to them by many in the community. And now we're not seeing the fruit that we thought might fall from the tree. I never believed it was going to fall from the tree, but
Mm.
that's where we are now.
Well, I'm wondering if I just want to hop in there, and I'm wondering if we're seeing this slowdown because of alien tech. And I mean, this is where my mind went to, is that a lot of times from the narratives I understand, there is a resistance to talk about alien tech, because then you talk about 0 point energy, and then you talk about systems that would lay waste to our current systems and their related economy. And so there's this huge like ripple effect on any string that you pull in this area, which I think is kind of what you're trying to say, is that it's not going to be a nice, neat cut piece of pie for you. It has to be something different than that. And I'm just wondering if they're resisting, if they're doing a pullback because of tech, or if there's another reason.
Well, I think there's probably multiple reasons, and some of them we may not even know about. But
Sure.
one of the obvious one that springs to mind is national security. And recently, a German representative to one of the organizations that I belong to, called ISA, he interviewed Chris Mellon, and Chris Mellon stated, he was asked by Robert Fleischer, this is what is going to be for the benefit of the world. And Chris Mellon responded, this isn't for the benefit of the world. This is for the United States. All this that we're doing is for the United States, for national security. So this whole idea that the whole world was going to learn what the United States has locked away, information about this, is I doubt is going to come to the fore. There may be little tidbits released occasionally, that little crumbs that keep people happy, but really what they're looking at is as a military response to this. We have to understand from a military point of view, representing a country, this is seen by them as a threat in their airspace. If they don't know what it is and they don't know who they are, they may know some of the visitors to this planet, but they may not know them all. And there may be some that they are really closing the doors about, because they can't admit that they don't have the power to know who this is. They can't admit that they don't have the power to combat a potential threat. So this whole potential threat thing becomes the narrative. And we're slowly seeing this creep a little bit. This is of grave concern to most experiencers who've had positive experiences, such as myself. If the thought that this blanket theory of this whole future contact being a threat becomes the narrative, that's of deep concern to people like ourselves.
Just trying to digest and take that in. I'm also weighing that against what Sue Walker has talked about. It'd be great to get you two together on a show. Wouldn't that be you two and like a third person for a panel. But I feel like, well, I wanted to know, I guess, I'm sorry, I have like 5 thoughts that are vying for my mouth right now. And how you said that you hadn't a sense of that this wasn't going to go down the way that people were dreaming that it would. And why did you have a sense of that? What kind of clued you in that it wouldn't be so neat?
Because of what the ETs have told groups of humans that I've been in over the years, and everything they've told, I can now go back through my book, Kat, and I can go tick, 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 tick.
Wow.
Of all the things that they predicted would happen that are now happening. Everything from streams of migrants going from one country to another, looking for somewhere to belong physically, spiritually, geographically, etc. They predicted all of that, right through to the slow pace towards disclosure and the obstacles along the way. So, yeah. Does that answer any question?
Yeah, it brought up my other question, which was, saying that they have to pull out and say, this is what Sue was saying too. They can't. There's as the ET awareness comes out, there has to be a thought about how you're presenting the relationship you've had, and it's more, she was saying that it's more likely for people to say, oh, well, us too, we've also known them. We won't be outdone by the other country. We will admit that we have a connection with them. So there's this, there's this different way about this, we have to think about our culture and like, yeah, what you said, how we do go into shock. Like the rest of us that are here are already indoctrinated, so to speak. Like we're ready for it, but that is a small portion. And we have to think about the different cultural implications and how it's all connected. I'm just so, yeah, go ahead.
It's not just the cultural implications, as you said, it's the technology as well. If technology is available, they don't want to give it to governments that they see may use it against humanity and weaponize it. And anything that may have come from Roswell or any other downed craft has been spirited away. The public hasn't been told about it. And when experiencers talk about technology and some of the wondrous things that it can do, they're treated a bit as a joke, or they're threatened into silence. So we know that there's a whole lot of stuff going on around the technology, and there's probably quite a little battle going on about who's going to gain control of it and how it's going to be used. So, we see these congressional hearings, and we see some congressmen and members there who seem to know absolutely nothing about the subject, or very little. And this is quite phenomenal, given what areas compartmentalized groups of the military or government in the states must know about this, but don't want to admit. So, we've got these people who are running the country, but are so ill-informed about what's really going on behind closed doors. So it almost trivializes their job, because they're not informed. And this whole contact thing is the biggest thing that's probably going to face humanity ever, or in the foreseeable future. So, how are we going to bring it out? So the human response is you demand, and we see a lot of disclosure groups, and they're demanding, and they're doing petitions, and they're trying to force the issue. And that's a great thing to get public notice of what's happening, but it's not so successful in terms of actually getting any results from it. What we're seeing now is quite a number of very powerful groups being formed by people in the UFO field, excuse me, but they're combined now with scientists, with lawyers, etc., other professionals. And we're seeing constitutions being formed, formalized, legalized groups registered in certain countries, who are becoming activist groups or educational groups or pressure groups or whatever. And some of those groups forming now are quite high caliber in terms of the scientists and some of the researchers that they've got working in them. And I think that this is a great thing, because it opens up the possibilities and the manner in which we can convey information to the public, while still keeping that pressure on our governmental bodies and military and MODs, etc. Is it going to make them release any more information? Probably not. But I think we have sufficient information worldwide amongst experiencers and long-time researchers to keep scientists busy for a very long time.
And that's what I see emerging, is that at a certain point, it's no longer negotiated by the government. I think that at a certain point, there's a thing of like, of course, they aren't going to disclose that. And there's just going to be those who are wanting the information, and they're going to go to those reliable sources that you're co-creating right now. And there's going to be those who want to just ignore it for as long as possible. And that's okay too. But I feel like at a certain point, like the government's interaction is just going to be discredited just due to their tripping, they're just due to the quagmire that they bring with them.
Well, there's been a long history of clandestine activity by government.
Yes.
And so who's going to trust them? Even if they said, look, we're going to release a whole lot of stuff and it's everything we've got, someone's going to believe that it's not everything they've got. So this is the attitude that the general public has garnered against governmental and military bodies. But of course, they can't go back to square one, way back decades, and say, yes, you're right, we had contact with them decades ago, because there'll be a furor. Why didn't you tell us all this decades ago?
Yeah.
So very cleverly, they have started at 2004, basically, with the Tic Tac footage, 2004, 2007. And it's like history starts here, folks. For us, the government, oh my goodness, we've got footage. Let's form a committee about this and investigate it. And the public says, hooray, at last we've got progress. But that progress has been going on for a long time, and they're never going to admit it. They have to start history somewhere where they can start bringing out information that they might have gathered a long time ago, but they can bring it out in the guise of recent discoveries.
Yeah.
And people can accept that, and there won't be that terrific upheaval and blame and groups forming in all directions and antagonism. So the information will come out, but it'll be slower and it'll be like a new discovery.
That's such a brilliant, the way you just unpacked that and folded that out was just so brilliant. It really makes sense as to why the mechanics are the way they are. Miss Linda, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I just think we have to be patient, and I'm just patient, and I trust the ETs because their information is proving correct year after year. And I don't worry about things anymore. You know, if I see big announcement coming out, I go, okay, and I register it and I think about it and I examine it, but I don't get hooked into it, because that could be what they want you to do.
Such a good point. Miss Angela?
Yeah, so it's kind of like a double-sided coin, right? Because the external information is one thing, but on the flip side of that, the information serves as the catalyst to spark the curiosity in everybody who comes across it and hears it. And I think that's where the biggest gains are made in the collective, the human collective. It's us basically doing the internal work, the spark of the internal work that has to be done in order for us to get heart-centered, so that we can accept, as a collective, accept what we are seeing, what we are in constant communication with. I think that's the bigger play. I mean, the information comes the way that it comes, and the seduction is to get sucked into that drama that is the interplay of the external work and how it's gonna play out. But the bigger piece of that, the bigger gain to be made, in my opinion, is doing that heart-centered work to come around to what is being presented externally, but internally received, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that absolutely makes sense. And I think that's why the ETs themselves are dragging it out. I mean, they could have come in and landed on the White House lawn a long time ago. But they know, and this whole undersea base meeting was about the way we psychologically deal with issues and how long it takes us to come around to a point. And I'll give you an example, but I won't name the group. I belong to several groups, but one of them recently, the executive agreed that a certain person out there at the moment was the real deal, was giving fantastic information, could be trusted. But I didn't feel that based on my ET experience. But so certain, you know, things went through and certain communications were made, etc. And now it is clear that that person is not the person they represented themselves as. So you see, we've got this process where humans learn from mistakes. And sadly, we learn from tragedy and loss and turmoil. Sad as that may be, it is part of the way we're built and the way we function for a long time, centuries. And for us to change that, it's not going to happen overnight. So this internal work you talk about has to be prompted, as you said, it has to be triggered by something. So even the pandemic, the so-called pandemic, has triggered many people. They've changed their lives. They've decided things need to be done differently for them, etc. And we will see more of this. We will see more movement within humanity itself. And that movement has to take place And it may be slow but steady, but it will transform us over a period of time. But the ETs are helping to speed it up in a number of ways. And one of the ways they've talked about, which I'm waiting to happen, and I'm just starting to see evidence of it now, is that they will start to increase sightings. Now, sightings have been in a real lull for quite some time now. Any researcher who's in the field will tell you that. But it's going to start speeding up, and there's going to be more people who not only see an actual craft as opposed to a light in the sky that can be explained away as anything. They will actually see a craft, and they will see the humanoids or the ETs as well. So we're talking about perhaps landed craft situations like that. So this is going to trigger a lot of people as well, and there'll be another slow, non-threatening consideration of that kind of situation. And the other thing that they said, which I'm definitely seeing now, is that more and more mum and dads, grandmas and granddads, and great aunties and great uncles will feel it's safe enough to come forward and say, actually, I think I have had contact, and these are the situations that I remember that point to it. And it has affected my life in this way, and I've never told you because I was too scared that you would walk away from me, or you would, respond with derision. So we're going to see more and more trusted people we look up to, come out and open the door to the contact. And the other thing that they said would happen, and I'm definitely seeing this now, I've got 4 people now that I'm working with manuscripts, experiencers who are writing books about their experiences. And we've seen a real upswing in the books coming out, people going public. So this too is another one of those things that makes people do internal work, makes people examine their belief systems. And we've even got this happening with theologians, with church ministers. I've got a good friend in the UK who's a church minister, and she's flown to different conferences to meet up with me and talk. And she is making real changes in the country that she lives in. And becoming, talking to people who come forward to her from her parishioners, talking about their experiences. They're not turned away. It's not couched as being evil and this and that. It's being looked at seriously. We've got church ministers worldwide starting to write books about their contact experiences. So this in turn opens up a huge amount of people in their parishioners who have to rethink their position, their dogmas, their situation. So it will open up slowly.
Yeah, so I got another question real quick. So does this, I've heard a lot of people recently, a lot of different people carry the same theme, and that is a theme of creation of schools for different types of schools, and then the desire to work with land. So multiple people I've heard speak recently are talking about getting big plots of land and doing things where they have a school and they go back to indigenous ways of doing things, or incorporating indigenous ways with the new ways of doing things, teaching in a brand new way, different from what we've traditionally done. Is that an encouragement from the ETs, or is that just a knowing within the human collective, a knowing that there needs to be a reconnection with Gaia to work with the planet itself?
Well, I've never heard the ETs specifically talk about that, but of course they run their own schools on a craft for humans, so they're already doing that kind of thing. But yes, I know a lot of people who are doing that, buying up land, setting up whole organic societies, designing buildings, designing, ways of living, whole new ways of living. And I think once again, this has been going on for decades for some people, but they've been a very small amount of people. But I think those triggers are happening again, and whether we like it or not, the whole COVID situation acted as a trigger. So we've seen in New Zealand, and I'm sure in other parts of the world, the virtual real destruction within, say, the education system. children in New Zealand, 25% of them are now not going to school after COVID. They're just skipping school. It's not important. It's boring. It's this, it's that. Let's go and do this with our mates. Their parents aren't making them. So the whole change in the way of thinking. And in some respects, it's a negative change because they're also getting into a lot of crime. However, in other respects, it's making the adults and the people within the educational system and the parents reassess, what does our child now need? What is different now? What can we do differently? How can this work differently so that we can bring these children back and get them involved in a different kind of education that bears fruit for humanity and for the environment? And I think that's, you know, we're seeing it in the medical systems, and all of these systems and institutions. Decades ago, the ET said these must change before we come down and you know, communicate openly with you. This has got to change. And we have to do it. And it doesn't happen overnight.
What were the medical changes they saw? That, or what you're seeing they're happening now? If you can elaborate. That was such a good breakdown about the New Zealand school. It was such a great, like, poignant, like, happening in real time moment. Well,
in the medical systems, we've already seen resistance by many people worldwide to the vaccinations, to the ability of the medical system to try to impose something on you, or even give you advice that is not complete or is not holistic and does not give you opportunities. I think we are all a little afraid of doing things with our body or to our body that we don't feel comfortable with, or we don't feel that we've been given all of the options. So I think there's going to be a greater demand to integrate some of the herbal and natural remedies into our systems, into our medical systems. And as new technology comes on tap, and I believe that new technology will be coming out in medical areas soon, and I believe some of it will be leaked UFO, alien technology. We're already seeing that. We're going to start turning away from some of the, you know, some of the unnatural things of, you know, drugs as the first call of treatment. And we're going to be looking at emotions, as the ETs did with me on the craft. And I'll be writing quite extensively about this in my second book, looking at the damage that was done to you throughout your life, either through abuse or assault or accidents or whatever, and how that's impacted your general health. So this compounds over the decades and creates these illnesses that we often have later in life. We'll be looking more at sound and light, different forms of light, because the demand is there and the research is being done. For example, I think I've talked before about the Jack Gallant Berkeley Institute at Berkeley University, Jack Gallant laboratory, experimenting with videos of the mind. So when we look at a certain image, certain parts of our brain light up. And they've now able to do this in reverse. They're now able to present a computer with certain brain functions lighting up, and the computer will spew out a picture or an image that they think this is representing, because they've created a library now of videos of the mind where they've done CT scans on people's brains when they're viewing certain things. So they know, so when you see a shark, your brain lights up this way. When you see a picture of a beach, it lights up this way. So we're discovering much more about how we function, and this naturally is going to affect how we treat illnesses and how we treat sickness. And also, as I found out after my speech at the Congress in 2018 in the States, the UFO Congress, I was approached by a medical professional who gave me his PowerPoint and said, use this freely. This is our version of the exotic machine that you saw functioning on a craft, and it was used on you on a craft that just involved a circle in the ceiling and this beam of some kind of light or energy coming down onto the body. Hey presto, healing. Hey presto, you can see into the body. And we've got this multi-million-dollar machine that we've now produced in the States that can do something along the lines of that. He said, that's where we're going. That's where we want to go, what you talked about. But we're only at this stage now, and it's a massive machine costing millions. But one day there'll be a small machine costing not so much, and they'll be available to everyone. This takes time.
Wow, that's beautiful. Linda, did you want to hop in?
Yes, I have so many. We've got questions on the side, but I have questions on, or just comment on the medical side. I can remember when infrared was new and you could go into saunas, and that was basically where you got infrared. And yeah, I went to acupuncturist last week, and he said, you know, what would really help you is some infrared. I already have a wand that I use all the time. You know, our technology has changed so much that I have something that's shorter than a pencil and you know, 1.5 inches wide that gives me infrared, white, blue, all the above, strobing, you know, for $50, and it does wonders.
Brilliant.
You know, so what a change in our technology just in the last 10, 15 years.
That's right.
Yeah. So
And,
we have some, oh, go ahead.
No, go on, Linda.
We did have some questions and kind of comment questions. And I will get to them, but I have another question for you. In the United States, I don't know what other places it's happening. I'm really seeing this divercation of philosophies where being kind is seen as weakness, that talking about emotions is not being appreciated. And for us as a community, I know you're very active now in helping to promote all of this within your community worldwide. What do you recommend for each of us to help bring this more into fruition?
You're talking about the compassionate side of our nature, needing
Yes.
to bring that forward. Yeah, that's a difficult one because human beings can be very nasty. It's an inherent trait, and changing that, as I said, is can be quite momentous. For some people, it can happen very quickly through a tragedy or something that affects them personally. But one of the things I'm seeing worldwide at the moment is bullying in every shape and form, and especially on social media, etc. So this is this very sinister side of humanity coming out. And as difficult as it may be, even for me to say this and publicly, the ETs have said that basically we have to be brought to our knees, not by them, but by our world situation. Because for us, it is a way of bringing us to our senses, a way of us viewing things differently. Very often people can relate negatively to people simply because they have not experienced that themselves. Often bullies have been abused, and that's why they're a bully. But very often people will jump on the bandwagon, especially on social media, start ripping into someone because it gives them a buzz. And we have to find other ways in our education systems and in our day-to-day life where people get a sense of achievement and self-worth without resorting to that negative side of our nature. So one of those ways, of course, is through something touching us personally. And if we head into the severe weather and increasing severe weather and earth changes, food shortages, water shortages that the ETs are predicting, then we will be brought to our knees, and we will have to learn to cooperate with each other and barter with each other and assist each other in survival in many countries. We look now at countries like Pakistan. It was virtually underwater, except for its mountainous areas, recently with their floods. And we have to learn to, we're already doing it in some respects where we assist other countries around us when something is tragic and is happening. But in other areas, we don't. We stand back because of political alliances, cultural alliances, etc. And those have to be overcome or eliminated in some way so that we can interrelate to each other in a positive sense. And only when we can do that to a greater extent than we are doing now, will we have this open contact. If you were an ET out there looking at a warlike race of people who had these negative traits and all of these things happening on their planet, would you feel safe coming down in great numbers and trying to interact with them? I don't think I would feel safe.
No. And I actually felt like that's why there was a pullback on contact. And I'm curious, this brings me to my next question. With the contact increasing, is that going to be more at the conscious level and getting those messages, or is it going to be more at the physical level that people are going to start having more contact?
With contact increasing, I don't see it as new people having contact. I see it as people who've had contact but don't necessarily recall it or only recall little bits of it. It's going to come to the fore. And in my book in particular, I describe the third wave, which are my son's age group in their 30s, 40s, and they are starting to wake up. And two of the people who are writing books are third wavers who've woken up just like that, and they've gone through hell for a period of a couple of years to try to assimilate it all and get up to speed and realize what they're supposed to be doing and inform themselves. Is a massive task. And years ago, the ET said people like me, who are the second wavers, and the parents of many of these young people are going to have to do the hard work of helping them assimilate, bring them up to speed, or they're going to crash and burn. We don't want them crashing and burning. They need that support, help, and assistance. And because then they're going to slip into their roles very quickly, combined with the professions or work that they are doing, whether it be analytical, scientific, medical, or whatever. Once this other super awareness opens up in them, their whole world will change. Their view of what they're doing in medicine or education or science or geology or whatever will change. And then we'll see this real upliftment. We'll see this forward movement. But it's the rest of humanity who doesn't really think about anything to do with UFOs or ETs, who will probably be the last to come up to speed when they see all of this happening and more people come out talking about their experiences.
So for those of us that have felt we've had contact once or more, or we question it, is it just going to spontaneously start happening with us, or are there things that we can do that can help spark that?
Well, I always say that they always talk about timing. Everything is timing to the ETs. And if you're a cog in a wheel and your number is 74, and when your cog 74 is due to start turning, it will turn. And there's going to be nothing you can do about it. You won't be able to stop it. That's where you will have to assimilate it, work with it, readjust yourself, work on your inner self, all the things that might be needed for whatever it is that you need to do.
Okay, and then I'm going to ask the couple questions that we have. Thank you for saying that, because I know that comes up all the time when people are talking to me about what can I do? What can I do? I want this to happen so much. What can I do?
I usually say to people, lead a good life, be a good person, be compassionate, do what you can for the environment, and be patient.
Oh, that's great.
I have a quick question, Linda, before you go to the next set of questions. Yes. Piggybacks on this one. So I remember hearing you speak to Karen Swain in an interview back a while ago, and you mentioned the completion, like the last phase of the waves to come in. I'm curious, have the completion started to come in yet? Because I have
the endpoint children.
Yeah, exactly.
Endpoint children, that's so dramatic.
Yeah, I'm curious because I'm awake, right? And I have two children who are like just like me, right? Just like me, who are in that space. So I'm curious if they are part of that. I'm just curious, out of curiosity, and if they're starting to come in, and for how long will they come in?
Okay, well, that's a big answer that I could give there. So I'll try to cut it back a bit. There are some contact researchers out there who are promoting star children, etc. Right? Mm-hmm. Star children, in what I understand in the 3 waves, take up this much space in the first wave. And they're keeping on being born into the planet, okay? But they are not the ones. They are affecting humanity in showing humanity what we can do with our psi abilities, etc., with our art and our music and our healing, etc. So they are way showers. But it's the 3rd wave, the children of the 2nd wavers, who are the ones who are going to affect the greatest change, who have the ETs use the words, they have the most vast education and the biggest task to do. It is monumental what they will have to do in our future. If you look at what's happening on the planet now, it's in chaos everywhere you look. They have to fix this and make it so that it's okay for the ETs to come down and communicate with us. That's monumental.
Yes.
So these 3rd wave children who are now young adults, up to, the oldest one I've found so far is 45, and he's probably right on the edge. They are the ones who are going to have the most effect. Now, there are star children in that category there, which some people call star children. I call them the enlighteners in the 1st wave. They will also have children who will inherit their genes, inherit their psychic abilities, learn compassion and all of the good things that I'm sure, Angela, you are teaching your children, and they will grow up to be spectacular human beings, involved in all kinds of things that's good for humanity and the planet. But it doesn't necessarily mean that they have a vast task to do, such as the 3rd wavers. And when I talk about the complex programs that the ETs have been running for decades, they are exceptionally complex. Even I struggle to envision it myself sometimes, because millions of people are involved in them. But we all are involved in different parts of the program. And some of us have had minimal contact. We've been taken on board for certain specific reasons. And then the ETs say we leave them to sleep. And then at some stage in the future, they'll be triggered and there'll be something really good and important and useful that they will do in life. But in the meantime, they'll lead good lives. And then there's the people who've been involved in the hybrid and the production of babies. That's a whole other area of the program. There's those scientists who are taken on board and given technological information that is now leaking through. They don't remember going on board, but I remember seeing them in a lecture hall being talked to. They didn't know where they were. They just knew they were in a lecture hall. They were in an altered state. They were absorbing the information, but they didn't know they were on a craft. They thought they were at a university lecture or something. They wouldn't remember it when they got home. But when the time is right and the trigger takes place, the information starts to leak out. And I think this is how some of our technology that's so similar to the ET's technology is coming out now. It's leaking out. And as we leap forward in our understanding of physics, and the James Webb satellite is providing us with huge amounts of information about space and physics, then we will make these leaps forward. And as we leap forward, there'll be a whole raft of more humans who'll be triggered to play their part. And we leap forward again, something else evolves, and it starts again. This is a very intense, detailed program that they've worked out. And millions of humans are part of it, whether they know it yet or not.
That's just so, it's like a bell going off in my head. The way you can lay things out, it's so clear, and it kind of, I feel like I'm invited into what's happening as opposed to scratching on the outside and trying to figure it out. Like, you're inviting me into the process and why it exists. And that's such a blessing. Would you speak about the new tech that's coming out soon, since we're on that topic? And then we'll throw it back to Linda's questions for the audience.
Well, the new tech that's coming out, I think, is going to be very, very related to light and frequency. It's all going to be frequency, whether that's light or sound. But I also think that it's going to be much more related to emotions and the effect of emotions in our life. Now, if you talk about that to most doctors these days, there'll be some who'll key into it and say, yes, that has a lot to do with it. For example, I have rheumatoid arthritis, and my rheumatologist, when I was first diagnosed, said, I believe that all rheumatoid arthritis, or most of it, is a gene that is triggered by trauma in your life. You have a trauma, it triggers that gene that you're carrying, you end up with rheumatoid. And that made absolute sense to me. So we're going to be moving into areas which are more holistic. And I'm going to give you a little insight into some of the stuff I'm writing about for my next book. I've talked before about bridging technology, where the ETs create some technology, be it a computer or whatever, that is like a halfway point between what we can understand or what we've already got and what they've got, because they couldn't show us and introduce us to what they've got. It involves consciousness all the time, and we haven't got that far with consciousness. So they have a bridging technology that's somewhere in between. And I believe that a lot of the tests that I and other experiencers have gone through on board craft, where you're put in front of a computer, you've been taught how to use it and what it can do, and they want to see you do it. They want to see you do it on your own, give you a task to do and watch you do it using the consciousness, bringing out the holograms, reading what's on it, flicking it away, etc. So this bridging technology is probably being leaked to our scientists. So we're seeing technology coming out that's really good, but it hasn't got the consciousness component, but it's getting quite close to what they can do. It's on the right road, put it that way. So we're going to see a lot more progress in those areas. But on one occasion, which I'm writing about, I was taken on board, and I believe, I wasn't told this, but I believe they were using me as a test subject to trial this bridging technology. So they had 7 or 8 lecterns, what we would call a lectern, something on a pedestal, and it was a computer on the top, like a screen. They stood me against a big white screen, and it was only partially lit in the room. It wasn't bright at all, it was quite dim. And they were conversing with each other very rapidly, telepathically, and I could only pick up little bits because it was what I call hypertelepathy, really fast. But they were going through my body. So as to what part of my body or how they were viewing my body on the screen, I don't know, because I couldn't see that. But they were going through, and they were going right back in my body to early childhood and birth. And they were looking at injuries. They were looking at emotional blows, physical blows, accidents, things, Linda, where people had bullied you and that emotion went really deep and it stayed there and it's still there and it can be triggered by people. These are the things we carry around, and they know that it can cause ill health. So they began going through some of these things and experimenting with light. So each of the consoles would send a band of light at a certain part of the body, and within so many seconds another one would go to another part of the body, because they were then looking at compensations, how the body then compensates. The emotions compensate, the brain compensates, and it all ties together and makes a mess. And they were basically unraveling and having a look. They weren't fixing me, because I've always said there's only certain things I can do to fix you, that according to agreements, but they were tracking back at all the things that had happened in my life and how it had brought me physiologically to where I am. So in our future, I guarantee in the next decades, we'll see something like that comes out that can just track back, unwind back through, fix something, or give you something to work on. This happened, go and talk to a counselor about it, or whatever. And we will see these natural healings taking place and a greater understanding of our deeper selves. And when we have a greater understanding of the deeper self, the healing and the work that we then do on ourselves is lasting, and it emanates to others.
Right, you just nailed it. The source of all dis-ease is finding that root, that source of the creation of the limiting belief that's held in the body. That's it in a nutshell. Yeah.
Yeah. And sometimes we can have an accident where we injure a part of the body, but the emotions attached to that accident, right, be it a car accident, or if someone is killed, or you lost a loved one, or whatever, that is cellular memory for you. And that injury may not be a severe injury. It could, with physio, it could get better, but it doesn't get better because your mind is limiting it from getting better.
Right. Exactly. Wow.
Yeah, I actually knew a woman that was a scientist who wrote a book called Cellular Wisdom. And she actually studied where and how the emotions stored in our cells, and came up with processes for releasing them. And I did body wraps for people with one of my career moves. And I could tell when somebody went through trauma and about when they did in their lives by when different things showed up in the solutions that came out of them.
Yeah.
So they were detoxing, and it would sometimes they'd be incredibly emotional, just like you do when you have a massage and it releases some of those. That's one of the ways. So yes, we definitely store those emotions physically in our bodies.
That's how things get passed through the lineage, right? From mom to child, right?
Wow.
That's how you get passed through the lineage. Yeah.
Yep.
Absolutely. Okay, back to questions. I think I got Laura's. Laura, if I didn't, please speak up and let me know. We had a second question. Kat, I'm not seeing
One
it.
question was, when's your next book coming out?
Yes.
I'm getting asked that a lot. I'm working on it, but because of a number of things that have happened in my personal life and in my health in recent years, since 2018, it has slowed down. And COVID, of course, the groups that I'm working with working to establish certain groups in the UFO community. So my work has really increased, and but I'm not too worried about when the book is coming out. I can't say when it's coming out because it will come out when basically they tell me it should be coming out. It'll be to do with timing and whether or not what I write will be received at the time, at the right time. If I can put it, I don't know if you understand that, but basically it's about timing. So it won't be yet, but I am going to be introducing some live talk on my Facebook page on a regular basis that covers small snippets of information and comment on the things that are happening at the time in the world and how it relates to this subject.
Susie, I have one more question. And the question I have, the I've had many visions of sitting in front of a whiteboard, many dreams of all night long studying this whiteboard that I don't see any of the writing on. And I believe that that's, I'm in training, I'm getting these downloads. And I know a lot of people have talked about that. And I'm wondering, those urges that you have to do really big shifts in your work or your interests, how much of that could be that subconscious movement towards your training to allow it to emerge?
Yeah, probably a lot. And just from a personal point of view, about a year ago, I had the urge to, I was trying to convince my husband that we needed to move to another part of New Zealand. And then funnily enough, I found that two other friends of mine who have been in the field previously, older friends, were already moving to that same area, and they'd had the same urge. For a whole variety of reasons, we couldn't make that move, but I'm not too concerned about it, because whatever the opportunity or whatever was perhaps waiting for me there will come around again. It'll just come around at a different time and a different form, but that'll be in the future, I think. But yes, I think that people, if they feel a real gut feeling that something needs to be done, then follow it. I have not followed my gut feeling on several occasions in my life, much to my detriment.
I actually felt that moving where we moved. When I came here, it was home. It was the only other home that I knew. It was like, I am supposed to be here. What's interesting is this sleepy little town now has 200 or 300 maybe people coming in, that out of a population of 8,000 that had that same, I've got to be right here. So something is, for some reason, all of us are coming to this one area.
Yep.
Well, let's talk about that, because I think that ties in with Earth changes in my mind, in terms of like knowing where you're supposed to be geographically. And I don't know if your ETs talk about the micronova, or if they're talking about global climate change, but I was wondering if maybe you could outlay what they see happening and why, and our best options to navigate that, because we chose to be here for a time. I don't want us to go into victim mode. Like, if this is the time that we chose to show up on the planet, then what is our active role as all of these radical changes continue to press forward?
Yeah, well, what they have shown is increasing Earth changes and particularly severe weather, which we are seeing a lot of now, that has just gone through the States, that we've been watching on our television. So they have always said that the more people who wake up, and there was no stipulation of in what way they might wake up. It was just, I guess, a change, creating a change in a person's life and in their persona. That was the important thing. The more people who wake up, the less severe it will be. And that always conveyed to me that our mass consciousness, we can affect our surroundings and our environment through our mass consciousness, because consciousness is everything. So it means to me that although they have shown on screen some pretty severe Earth changes, they always said that we can minimize them through our work that we do in waking other people up. But there is a timing always to that as well. So I think we're going to have to go through some bit of hell on the way. But it's the 100th monkey syndrome, basically, that they're talking about, where 30 monkeys can be doing something and the rest of them the other 70 don't take any notice. But then if they all start copying each other and they all start doing this one thing and realize the value of it, then suddenly it's normal and they're all doing it. And we see this now where taboo subjects once upon a time that we wouldn't have talked about because there would have been too much derision, we can now talk about them. It's okay to do that. People feel that permission is there. And it's the same with this. I think that the volcanic and seismic activity is going to increase, and obviously we're going to get a lot more flooding and torrential downpours. Our weather is really changing, and as to whether that's solar activity, I think that solar cycles has a lot to do with it. The ETs never talked about what caused it. They just talked about what potentially would happen and how we can combat it, the different ways in which we can combat it, from our consciousness through to just being practical and preparing and equipping ourselves for emergencies.
And that, oh, go ahead, Angela.
I was just going to say, you talked about that 100 monkey effect. This gives credence to standing in your authenticity, being authentic, because you create that space for the people around you to do the same. It won't happen if you're continually wearing the mask, playing the game, playing the role. But if you stand in your power and be who you've come to be authentically, you create that space for the ripple effect to happen around you. Yeah. Yes.
And sometimes being different from the crowd has its consequences. But if you are secure in your own space, you can ride that out until the 100th monkey happens and everyone joins you.
Right. That's exactly right.
Susie, I have to say, since 5 minutes into the show, I've continually heard 100th monkey repeatedly since 5 minutes into the show.
That's wild.
Mm. Well, there you are. Confirmation.
Confirmation.
So Linda, did you have any other questions that you wanted to say before I hop in? I
don't think so. I've been kind of going for it. So your turn, Kat.
Okay. All righty. Well, one of the things I wanted to know was, this is a bit kind of going off into a tangent, I suppose, but where does did your ET family ever talk to you about the Great Floods or Atlantis or the Anunnaki or any of that? Like, do they have a relationship to that, or is that even relevant to them? They couldn't care less, or what is that for them?
No, I never ever heard anything about that. In fact, a lot of experiencers will tell you they haven't heard anything about that. It's always been very forward focused. This is what's going to happen, this is what we must do in order for you to join the cosmic family, these are the steps that must happen, etc. And there hasn't been so much of that going backwards, only in very minimal amounts, but nothing of big note that you could talk about.
That's just a curious thing for me, because I've recently attended the Ancient Civilizations Conference, and it's interesting to look at this whole continuum of our progress. And I guess that's the other thing I did want to talk to you about, is what people perceive and kind of the social media narratives versus really what you've laid forward today, which is so much more like succinct and thought out and grounded. Because what do they say about being able to rescue people in times of great catastrophe? I know that's in our history. We've had like the ant people that took the Hopi Indian people underground, the Aboriginals in Australia to speak of this. And I'm wondering, what do your people say about in terms of helping humans get through the times of physical catastrophe where their lives are in danger?
Okay, can I just ask you, what was the first part of that question?
It was just maybe that what do they say about what the part about social media? There's this thing of like, don't worry, the ETs will get us all. The ETs will help us out, and they'll put us all on their ships. And other people are like, no, that's fallacy. And I'm just wondering, like, where you are in that.
Okay, I was just making notes so that I could answer each, but I'll start with how we're going to rescue people. Well, I think what they're trying to teach people is self-responsibility. We should be taking responsibility for ourselves. And as I've said before, New Zealand is a very seismic volcanic country. We're called the Shaky Isles. And, you know, we have a lot of volcanic activity. And we have our, you know, if we want to be really practical, we've got civil defense, and they put out a list of things that you should have for your own survival and security. And if you haven't got that kit together and stored somewhere in your house, then more fool you. You know, so I think humanity doesn't share easily always. So if we've got terrible situations that may arise with even with our changing weather, if you're all equipped, then you're not draining someone else of their resources. You need to be equipped yourself. Now, in terms of the ETs helping to prepare for this, I have seen, I actually lectured to a group on a craft. They wanted humans in front of humans in this case, because these were humans who did not have a history of coming on board. This was a once-er for them. And many of them, there were multiple lectures happening on a craft. There were about 8 of us who were being utilized as the person out the front. But the ETs were in the background unseen, because if someone slipped out of the altered state, they didn't want them to see an ET face and start screaming. They wanted them to see a human face. So we had been prepared to do this work, and this was just prior to the big Japanese tsunami and a number of other tragedies that took place that killed thousands of people. So we had no foreknowledge of that. We just had lecture times a month apart. So I think it was 2010 and 2011, and then, you know, say March, and then in April, we did it again. And there were hundreds of people brought on board from all walks of life who had particular personality traits that they had tracked down. So you can see how huge this and complex this is, that they're even tracking down humans who are going to be useful in these tragic situations. So they had all these people in my lecture theatre. There was 250 people, and they were everything from scientists to village leaders in small communal areas of third world countries. But they were people who were balanced and grounded and sensible and practical, and had the trust of the people and could assist and organize things when tragedies occurred in communities. And we're looking into the future when things are much worse than what we're seeing now. And now is pretty bad, but the images that I was shown a couple of decades ago were much worse. So they are preparing people. They are preparing scientists with technology, simple things to do with being able to survive with, you know, even tents and things like that. New means of doing things, new means of purifying water are going to be coming out very soon. And this will be prior to these things happening, because these lectures happened prior to those big earth changes, tragedies and weather tragedies. Still, people lost their lives, but there may have been, we will never know how many were assisted in safety and survival by people like this who are taken on board the craft and lectured to. So that's that part of it. In terms of, there's a lot of groups that are forming at the moment, and we see on social media people claiming all kinds of spectacular abilities as starseeds or hybrids or whatever. And I'm not saying that some of those things aren't true, but you know, when people say they go to this planet or that planet every weekend, I have to wonder about that, because I've never come across that in all of my 67 years of contact. So I think we have to be very careful what's taking place, because it is also in human nature to embellish and to make claims that are not correct and lead people up the garden path. And what is happening now, I'm assisting in forming a group of experiencers who, the only people who are part of this group will those who pass what we call the poke test. So we're not saying that people can't have contact through meditation or through CE5 or anything else. We're not saying that this is not a valid form of contact. What we are saying is that the people who can pass what we call a poke test, and I'll explain that in a minute, are more likely to be lifelong experiencers who've had hundreds of experiences on board craft in their life and who have specific tasks to do, and who can probably present the most data. I can tell you about technology. I can tell you what the lighting is like on a craft. I can tell you what their skin is like. That is called the poke test. So if you have got close enough to an ET, an actual physical ET, that you could touch them and poke them, then you are part of this group. Because the information that the second wavers, who are the people most likely to have had these lifelong experiences, the information we can give is vast, but the opportunities for us to share that information have become smaller and smaller and smaller, because a lot of conferences don't want to hear from us. They want to hear more what I would call the New Age narrative. They don't want to hear that data. But mark my words, the people behind the scenes in the governments want to hear that data. So this group is going to be supporting people and including people who've had these kinds of in-depth contacts where they can describe the environment on a craft, what an ET is like, because they've stood next to them and they can touch them. And we feel that a lot of our material has been watered down. It's been made superfluous over particularly the last 10 years. And we've got people out there saying, oh, you're a nuts and bolts experiencer. I can just sit and go into meditation and ET standing right next to me, etc., etc. That's all very well, but how much data do you have about ET? You know, you might feel warm and fuzzy and you might feel that ET's helping you to do something or whatever, but what data do you have about their lifestyle and their persona and their craft? Because in the future, that's the data we will need. If we are to relate to them, we have to understand them. And so the poke test experiencers have that kind of data. I have that kind of data. The 4/3 waivers I'm working for have that data. It's now come out for them. They didn't have prior recall, but boom, it's all there and they're having to deal with it. So we have seen this watering down in the whole UFO field. So we've had a lot of derision towards the nuts and bolts researchers. I'm a nuts and bolts researcher as well as being an experiencer. Does that minimize me because I'm a nuts and bolts researcher who goes out to the farm paddock where someone saw something land or lights out there and whatever? No, it does not minimize me. It just means that a lot of people my age and older who were researching in the field decades ago have amassed a huge amount of data. And in those days, there was minimal contact taking place in terms of their work. That there was a poor understanding of contact. Even when John Mack, David Jacobs and Bud Hopkins came along, there was no textbook. They were just floundering to do their best with this flood of people wanting to talk about experiences. So we don't have the right to categorize people who have data. They're not boring. It's what we need to understand what we're going to be meeting.
Well, I think it's a whole balance of left and right, it's we need both because that's how we're built. So we need both, and you can swing from one to the other, but at the end of the day, we have to balance them together because we're meant to be this whole, not an extreme.
That's right. And so, there is a flood of people in this category and a smaller amount in this category. And I agree the balance is needed. If these people are talking more about, they say they're talking more about consciousness, but hey, the people in the poke test group have grown up with consciousness. consciousness has been a part of everything they've done on a craft. Why should they be minimized? So there you are. My little rant for the day.
I appreciate your passion. So we're getting close. How much we're like almost at the end of our time, but I had a second question and then we're to wrap up. Would that be okay? Or do we need to wrap up?
Yeah, that's fine.
It's okay. All right. I'm wondering in terms of as these changes are happening, all of these changes, it's also impacting us on a financial level. And there's a lot of talk about, you know, a new system coming through. And again, what have the ETs shown you in terms of our financial system evolution, implosion, whatever it might be?
They've never talked about the financial system to me or in any group I've been in. I think they're more concerned about how we develop as people, and as we develop into better people and develop our consciousness, then we will do things differently in finance or anything else.
That's well said.
We're basically crippling ourselves at the moment, aren't we?
Yeah. And it would make sense and to go to the root source of the issue as opposed to trying to fix it at a systemic level. All right. Well, with that, Miss Susie, then I will ask you, what would you like to share with our audience before we go? From your heart to ours, what would you like to say?
Well, if you feel that you've had contact, please contact someone reliable and trustworthy to talk to, but talk to someone about your contact and talk to a variety of people, because you don't want to be taken down one alley when there's other alleys that might suit you better. If you are considering regression, be careful that you go to people who are qualified and are under supervision by a professional body and belong to a professional body. Otherwise, I think in the future, there'll be a crackdown. I believe, and the ETs have said, there's going to be a crackdown on experiencers, and every aspect of you will be examined. So, you know, you keep everything above board and be true to yourself. And trust. I think everyone needs to trust that although humanity may face hard times, we're not going to be wiped out. The ETs have never said we're going to be wiped out. They've just said we're going to go through rough times, but when, you know, many of us all emerge the other side. Sadly, there will be some who won't, but humanity will survive. And what they're trying to do is get the best of us, get the best out of us. The sooner, the better.
Nice. And one little quick question that I did forget to ask for the people, because not everyone knows who you are the way that I think they should. But your people, we say they're the Zetas, but how do you describe your people? Like when you talk about your ET family, you give us your definition of who they are.
Okay, well, I just simply know them as the Greys, and as a child, I didn't call them the Greys, of course, because that's a more recent terminology. I don't recall calling them anything. They were just like beings to me. My mother used to talk about beings, so that was a terminology that I knew. They didn't have fancy names. You recognize them by either their physical attributes or their frequency. But I had nicknames for some of them. People say, oh, Suzy Hansen, a lot of the interviews say that I've, talking about my Zeta friends, I've never called them Zetas ever. And there are a few people out there taking snippets of my speeches and giving it their own slant and their own meaning. So if you're listening to a podcast or anything that says Suzy Hansen said this and they're giving a little clip, don't believe it. Just come to me, just send me an email, because if you hear me speaking, it's me. If you hear someone else saying that what they think I meant about something, it's not me, not necessarily me. So that's kind of muddying the waters for quite a few experiencers, where people claim to know what we mean, and it's not what we mean. And I've had to take a few people to task, and they've got a little nasty about it.
That's the teacher in you coming out being like, I will
Yes,
take you to task.
absolutely. Once a teacher, always a teacher.
I love that. All right, well, I'm going to flip us into the Brady Bunch view here and toss the mic to Miss Linda, and we will start our gratitudes as we close the show.
Again, everyone, thank you so much for the great conversations on the side and the support that you've given to each other as people have talked about their own experiences. That's one of the things we do in our Facebook group. So if you have not joined it, come over and find a safe place to just connect and share your experiences without judgment. Also, want to thank everyone again who has donated to us through coffee. And thank you, Susie. Again, you left me with more questions that I could gobble you up for about 10 hours and then come up with even more questions. So thank you again. Make sure everyone, you go down and look at the links for Susie, and also for beautiful, why did I just go blank on
her name? We call her Angela.
Angela?
She's radiating over there. That's why her glow threw you off.
Somewhere in the show I was going to have a brain fart because it's been 2 weeks. So Angela, make sure you go down and get Angela's information as well. Yes, go to Susie and Angela. Join us next week. Kat, what's happening next week?
Next week it's Sherry Wild. I can't believe I'm going to have Sherry Wild. You know Sherry, Susie, right?
I do, yes. Sherry and I have done a joint interview actually with Judy Carroll from Australia. It was great.
I saw that interview. Yeah. And so I've been trying to get Sherry on for a year, but her health has just been, very challenging. And now she's like turned a corner for the better. And she's going to be on our show. So I'm super excited about that. And it's going to be amazing. And with that, thank you again, Susie. What a delight. It was just I feel like you brought me into your world a little bit more. And my understanding is just a little bit more grounded and a little bit more deep. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Kat, Linda, and Angela. I've enjoyed it as always.
Beautiful. All right, everyone, take care of yourself. We'll see you next week. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.